Alright, welcome back to Music 101. We'll be looking at Chapter 31, which is talking about chamber music and our boy Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So we have been diving through the classical period, and one of the most well-known composers of the classical period is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and he was born in 1756 and lived until 1791. Mozart is an Austrian composer as well as a pianist, and he was the son of Leopold Mozart, who was an esteemed court composer and violinist. He is the most extraordinarily gifted child in the history of music because he was a child prodigy. He rebelled against the patronage system at age 25 and was a freelance musician in Vienna. So he kind of created that profession that we still have freelance musicians to this day. Mozart's music has elegant and songful melodies, as well as contrast of mood and drama. And during the peak of his career, he composed 3 comic operas, The Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni, as well as Cose fan tutte, and I have played for 2 of the 3. He was a prolific composer of all genres, chamber music, keyboard work, symphony, concertos, and opera. So we've been talking about chamber music, and Mozart's contributions to chamber music was the divertimento and the serenade. These genres of the chamber music were lighter in characteristics, and they were performed at social functions. So one of the most famous serenades is Eine kleine Nachtmusik, or A Little Night Music, and this serenade is a string quartet with a double bass. So they were just different mediums were used for these serenades, and for this particular one it was a 4-string quartet. It was used for public entertainment, and it was usually an outdoor performance, and it's composed of 4 movements that were compact, intimate, and beautifully proportioned. So we talked about that classical music was all about the multi-movements, and Mozart does not disappoint here. So let's look at the form that provides the framework of this piece, and it uses sonata allegro form. And if you look in your book, you can find that sonata allegro form has 3 main sections. It has the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. So this is a little bit more complex than the forms that we have been, and more intricate as well. It supplies the framework. It provides profound musical conversation, and it's a favorite among instrumental composers of this time. So the first movement of Eine kleine Nachtmusik is in sonata allegro form, and remember we have the exposition, which highlights the theme, and then when you get to the development section, it goes and changes the theme using different ways. So it would like change the key, or it would change the rhythm, or it would change how long a note is played, how fast a note is played, things like that, chord structure, all of that would be changed in the development, and then you would recapitulation, you would come back to the original theme and the original key as well. So that shows you this right here. We have the statement of the theme in 2 opposing keys and themes. Then theme 1 is the home key or tonic. Then you have a bridge or a transitional passage that modulates to the second theme. That's usually in a contrasting key. And the closing section is often the first theme. In the exposition, this is a picture of Mozart performing as a young child. That's the exposition. In the development, which is the second section, so all of that was in, that's kind of confusing how that, is laid out. No, it's not going backwards when I'm hitting the backwards button. It's kind of confusing how that is laid out, but all of that is underneath the exposition section. So in the exposition, we have theme 1, a bridge between the 2, theme 2, which is in a contrasting key, but all of that is under the exposition. Then we move on to the development. There's usually conflict and action, building of tension and drama. The theme is varied, expanded, and contracted, like I was telling. Guys, basically we're saying the same things that we have done before where we talked about a theme and variations. It's the same thing. It's just done a little differently in the classical period and therefore has a different term. But it's basically the same thing. You're taking the theme and you're changing it up. Foreign keys, frequent modulations. When we talk about modulating between a different key, you have one key and then you change to the next key. So that's what the modulation is doing. There is activity and restlessness, and there is a bridge that leads back to tonic, which leads you to the recapitulation, which is the third section. This is the climax of the piece, and it returns back to the first theme. It restates the themes back in the original key, which is called tonic. And then the coda, sometimes they would have a coda, which is an extension of a closing idea. So it's kind of like what we were listening to. It means tail. Coda means tail. And it's just like a little tag. So if you were listening to a pop song and they did chorus and then went to the bridge and then returned to the chorus and then they did a little tiny, like maybe one line of the verse at the end, that would be considered a tag. So it's not a complete thought, but it's like a little tiny part of a tiny part of the song that they just go back and tag. And then the final cadence, the last cadence, is in the home key. Remember, cadence is the ending chord, going from one chord to another chord, and then that's like the last one. So that's what a cadence means. It's like closing. It's the period of the musical statement, and it returns back to the home key or tonic. So this just kind of shows you a path of sonata form. So we have a slow introduction, sometimes as optional. First theme, bridge, modulate to the second theme. And then the closing theme is a cadence in the contrasting key. Then the exposition is repeated, usually, with those same things happening. The development is building up tension. You transition back to tonic, and then the last section, as you can see, is all in tonic. So first theme, and it's transposed now. The second theme is there. All the notes are there. It's just transposed to tonic. So this changes keys in the exposition, and the recapitulation all stays in the same key. So that's the difference between transposing and modulating. Modulating, you are changing to a different key. Transposition is literally you take the same thing, copy and paste it, but then you move it either up or down in a different key. It's a completely different key, but it's the same rhythm and the same note intervals. So the third movement is a minuet in trio form. And so we talked about minuet when we were talking about Baroque dance suites, and it is a court dance in a triple meter. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. One of the most famous minuets. Be bum bum be da da dee da dee bum be dum ba. That's written by Johann Sebastian Bach. But it's a 3/4 dance is what it is. So it'd be like saying somebody from the future talking about the shoot, the different dances that we do, like the floss or, whatever. So it'd be like, you take your arms and you move it with your hips and whatever. So this dance was in 3. And its form was ABA. So the B section was originally for 3 instruments or a trio, and that's why the middle section is called a trio. And then a da capo, which means just to return to the beginning. That's all that means. And the first dance is then repeated. So with the internal structure, so within the 2 different sections of minuet and trio, and if you were looking at a piece of music, usually it was labeled minuet and trio, or you could just tell by the change of the music. Forgive me. It's either binary or rounded binary. Don't really worry about that. It was 2 parts and maybe had a little tag on the end with subsections repeated. So if you were looking at the music, it would be one section and then it would literally be repeat signs. You wouldn't even have the second section written out. And then you would do the same thing for the second section, etc., etc. Then the return to the A section or the minuet is played without repeats. So if you were to play this piece of music, you would play the minuet section and do the repeats, A, A, B, B. So man, I wish I could like show you actually a minuet trio form so you could see it, but it basically, there's piece of music and there's repeats on either side. You repeat both sections, go to the trio or the completely different contrasting section. So very similar to like the exposition, but there's not any of the original material anywhere in the trio. And then when you return back to the A section of the minuet, you play all the way through without the repeats. Remember, this is classical music, so everything makes sense and is logical, so it's symmetrical with 4 and 8 measure phrases. Here's a picture of Mozart. Mozart died at a very, very young age, which we'll talk about when we talk about his Requiem, which is kind of a shame because he did so much in the small life that he lived that he could have brought so much to music during that time. And so this is a couple performing a minuet in the 18th century court dance. So this is the form of Eine kleine Nachtmusik, which we will get to here. And you'll be able to listen to it. While that's loading, we can kind of talk through the different form here. We have the theme 1, which is an ascending rocket theme. You'll hear it. Theme 2, which is graceful and descending. The closing theme is with high energy. There's a short development, and then the recapitulation brings back all the themes with a coda in the home key. So this is a very, very famous piece of music. I'm pretty sure every single one of you have heard it. We'll make it one of your listening examples for your exam. Like, it is, without a doubt, one of the most recognizable pieces of classical music. So I do not have any doubts that you'll be able to recognize it. And then well, anyway, we'll talk about the second movement, the third movement, while I'm waiting on my technology to work here. Good contrast to, and it is in a minuet and trio form. It has a strong triple meter, has regular 4/5 phrase, second theme, and then a little tiny small return to the first theme. And the minuet is bright and decisive, and the trio is expressive and is a very contrast to the minuet. We'll go and talk about Mozart and his symphonies in the next video. All of this starts to get really redundant when you're listening to these lectures and you're looking and you're reading through your book about the different eras of music. The main thing you need to understand is we're expanding, but it wasn't as strictly formed as in Baroque with the Renaissance and the medieval music, and then we have slowly over time have tweaked it and changed it, and so that's basically what we're doing. So with Baroque, we had the same term might be describing